Okay, this is the Judiciary Committee of the Baltimore City Council. We are here for Council Bill 20-0557. This is a work session. I'm Councilman Eric Costello, 11th District Chair of the committee. I'm joined by Councilman Leon Pickett, 7th District Member of the committee, Councilman John Bullock, Member of the committee, Councilwoman Shannon Sneed, 13th District Member of the committee, Councilman Ryan Dorsey, 3rd District. On behalf of Mayor Jack Young is Nina Themlis, and I'm blanking who else is there, but I think we are ready to go. Give me 1 second. Just move that. Sorry, there was another call I was listening to. Okay, do we have anyone from BSIT here? Nina? Nina? Can you all hear me?
Yeah, sorry, I'm here. This is Nina.
Okay, do we have someone from BSIT here with us?
I do not see anybody listed in the participant list, and I will make sure that somebody gets on now.
Thank you. Let's go to the amendments that were circulated. I believe we can address the Second Amendment. Councilman Dorsey, do you want to give us a 30-second explanation of what that Second Amendment is?
Sure, Mr. Chair. I'd actually like to ask DLR to do a quick explanation of that, but it basically makes it so that rules and regulations can't be just struck away without there being any notice. That the removal of certain rules has to also go through the APA process. I'd like it if Tony could speak to that, perhaps.
Sure. This began with the law department's concern about the obsolete regulations provision, and it sort of grew out from there. And what this does is it addresses the law department's concern, I believe it does, and it also addresses my concern that there was a potential that obsolete provision, that obsolete regulation provision could be interpreted as meaning that, well, the DOT wanted some regulation repealed and they could use that provision as a mechanism. No, if you want to repeal a regulation, you need to go through the APA process. So that's what that does. Muted.
Unmuted. Thank you, sir. Colleagues, are there any questions on that? Victor, does the law have any concerns with that amendment?
Tony and I worked on that amendment together, so I'm good with it.
Sounds like a no. Excellent, sir. Thank you. Colleagues, is there a motion to move that amendment?
So moved.
Second.
That was a motion by Bullock, I believe, and a second by Sneed. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Let the record note Costello, Sneed, Bullock, and Pinkett are a yes. The remaining members of the committee are absent. I will note that Councilman Reisinger had a health appointment today, and Councilman Stokes, sadly, his older brother passed away this morning. So they're both excused today. We are waiting on Nina for the First Amendment. In the meantime, I know that we have one caller who would like to ask a few questions. Matt, we have Mr. John Laria on the line. Would you please give him access to speak? He has a few questions for the committee, and I'd like to accommodate him.
Yes, Mr. Chair. One moment.
Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Loud and clear, John. Take
Good. Thank you all very much for the time and for allowing me to speak. First of all, I just wanted to say thank you for undertaking this. Thanks to the sponsors for finally putting this on the legislative agenda and working to shepherd it through the council. A uniform and modern and sophisticated approach to regulations in Baltimore City is long overdue. And I think everybody who is doing business in the city, working with the city, being regulated by the city will very much appreciate the consistency, structure, formality, and all the things that this promises to bring. I will say that my first encounter with regulations for those of you who are relatively new, and I know some of you aren't, some of you are not, for a long time, the council did not really pass laws that necessitated the promulgation of regulations. But that has changed dramatically as the council has become more and more involved in policymaking, as is appropriate. And I think my first recollection of this happening was when the council in the mid-2000s passed the inclusionary housing law and directed the Department of Housing and Community Development to promulgate regulations to enact it, which became a very long, very tortured, very difficult process in which two very smart Baltimore City employees spent a very long time trying to generate a set of regulations that would work. They were smart, but they were not experienced drafters of regulations, and I think the process suffered for that, which is no reflection on them whatsoever, because it's a highly technical process and requires expertise and formality and so on. So since then, obviously other things have happened to generate regulations. The ones that I'm most familiar with as a practitioner in Baltimore representing regulated entities would probably be the regulations generated by the finance department with respect to many tax credits which exist. There are regulations probably for all of the various tax credits that are currently in existence. And this is really at the end of the day what I wanted to just raise with you as a question. In the planning department, as you know, since many of you, the council members here were involved in the passage of Transform Baltimore, there are a number of very significant guidelines or manuals that were generated that are directed by Transform Baltimore, and in fact have been produced by the planning department. And I frankly forget offhand whether they are adopted by the planning commission. I think they are. Someone might know, and I should have checked, and I apologize. But I guess I'm just trying to figure out, when I read the definition of regulation, which is broad and probably intentionally and even correctly broad, what is it intended to encompass? Because a regulation such as something that, for example, implements an inclusionary housing law or a regulation that implements a tax credit, there's a lot of similarities among those. There are rules and submission times and the form of this and the form of that. On the other hand, for example, the planning department manuals and guides are nothing like that. But arguably, they are something that meets, and I won't recite it all, the definition of a regulation. So I guess I'm just wondering if it's the council's intent to include all such things, or really just the operating rules associated with the implementation of laws that you have passed on specific subjects, like a tax credit, like inclusionary housing, and so on. So I guess that's my main question. But I'm wrapping that also in a really thank you for finally undertaking this effort, which really is going to be, I think, helpful to the conduct of business in the city, and certainly the business by regulated entities and businesses. So I'll pause. Happy to discuss that further if you like, but that's my main question.
I'm going to defer to the sponsors of the bill.
So it was originally intended for like everything that the public touches, basically. So we're not just, as we go, just making up things and stuff that doesn't make sense. I feel like a lot of times we piecemeal situations, and that's sort of where I was coming from when we started working together on this, to make sure that we have a kind of a plan, a rural regulations for everything that we do in Baltimore City. So we're not willy-nilly through different laws and legislations and policies through the city.
This would establish a baseline where there is not a baseline in many cases, or where where there may be a variety of kind of basic standards expressed throughout the code in different ways, in different subtitles. You know, it may say in one place, rules, regulations must be kept in the office of the director of a given agency. Elsewhere, it may say the rules are not in effect until they've been filed with a Department of Legislative Reference. There's certainly no public comment period in either of those cases, and there's certainly not consistency or parity between one or the other. It's the biggest intention here, as you know and understand, John, is just that it creates a baseline, but it also does not preclude more extensive requirements, additional requirements from being set in the kind of cases, perhaps like some of the examples where there's a manual that needs to be created, where things may need to be adopted by the planning commission, things like that. Those things that have additional requirements would continue to be allowed to have such additional requirements.
So I thank you, Councilman and Councilwoman. I appreciate it. And like I said, I mean, I really appreciate the intent and the execution of this. It's the right thing to do. It just that I read it as, as a consumer / regular, as I said, representing in my practice regulated entities and so on. And I was just wondering, what exactly it intended to apply to. The definition of regulation on page 3 of the original bill is quite broad, and that's probably fine. But everybody's familiar with the rhythm of an ordinance these days that will say, and the director of transportation. So, for example, for complete streets, I think you've got the complete streets manual. But for housing, for finance, the director of finance shall promulgate regulations, consistent with, to implement, et cetera. Everybody's used to that rhythm. I'm just saying that I think, I just want to make sure that it's not overbroad in a way that is going to create, if you don't mean for it to be subject to this rubric. And again, the thing I call to your attention, and I haven't gone through and tried exhaustively to think of others, but those are the ones that came to mind, which is, do you mean for the Planning Commission's design manual, which is required by ordinance and is a standard, arguably, which is part of the definition of regulation, to be subject to this? Maybe you do, but I just wanted to call to your attention that this potentially is going to impact all of those things, and I don't know to what extent, Councilman, anybody has done a exhaustive list of everything that exists today or that might exist to sort out whether every one of those things is intended to be subject to this administrative procedures process.
This is Vic Turvola from the Law Department. John, it's a good point, and I think the way I would interpret this law, the way I've read it, was that if we are interpreting any local law, if we have something that's interpreting a local law, it's going to be subject to these requirements.
Yeah, I don't, that may be, Vic, that may be perfectly fine. I mean, there's nothing, obviously, public notice, public comment, there's absolutely nothing objectionable in all of that. It's just that these things are potentially apples and oranges, and a design manual is not really a set of regulations. It really is a fully, it's not about implementation. If you compare what's in the design manual to what's in the regulations implementing the the newly constructed dwelling tax credit, those are two very, very different things.
I'd agree with you, and I would agree with you, John. I think I don't know about the design manual. I don't know what we're interpreting when we get to the design manual. I sort of, like you, I'm not thinking that it is tied tightly to any piece of legislation. It's just something else that's there. But frankly, I haven't looked at that particular that particular issue or manual.
Okay. Well, again, I don't know that it needs. I just wanted to raise it for the group. And the other thing I would say, and then I will yield, is I would encourage. I don't think it's formally in the law, but I would encourage the process, whether it's DLR, the law department, or the regulating agencies themselves, to be as inclusive as possible of the potential regulated authorities. Again, this is not the substance of the regulations. This is the process of what should they look like, how would they be designed, how would they be best consumed, and to the extent that it would be useful to have input on the form of these from regulated entities. I'm sure that people would be more than happy to be helpful, because I think most people would share the view that this is a worthwhile investment of time to have a much more standard and much more sophisticated approach to these regulations, which are subordinate to and in furtherance of ordinances enacted by the city. So that's the only thing I would say, and I thank you very much.
Thank you, John. Nina, do we have someone from BSIT on the line?
Yes, Mr. Chair, we have Robert McBride from BCIT to speak on behalf.
Mr. McBride, thank you for joining us. Excellent Zoom background. I like it. So we have your letter from yesterday, and I'm going to quickly run through a couple things. BSIT has reviewed this legislation to assess the cost and level of effort needed to build a technical solution to meet the requirements of this bill. BSIT developed a database to sort the name of the user of the PDF document and the status of the document. A website would be developed for the purpose of uploading the proposed regulations and any subsequent changes. These would be responsible for uploading a PDF of each of the proposed regulations via the website and updating each regulation status. BSIT would develop a public-facing website for the department determined to be the business owner based on the final legislation, either law or legislative reference, showing all regulations within the database in a table form organized by agency. Rudimentary search will be available, but will not search the contents of the PDF documents. There would be no validation by BSIT of the contents of the PDF documents. The anticipated cost of the development effort is estimated to be $150,000 for a full-time developer and a part-time manager, and could be accomplished within a 6-month time frame. As a IT professional for the better overwhelming part of the last 20 years, I have to push back on this cost estimate here of $150,000. We don't have a document management system or that we use for our website that would allow for this to be done more effectively and more efficiently.
We don't have a document management system. No. This is very similar to a revision control system for software, but we're asking for in-house development here, and we'll always incorporate the full costs of that. And there are back and forth. There's security concerns with everything we do now. And so those are all little pieces that have added to that cost.
That's helpful. My understanding is the city's law department is essentially a law firm, and law firms are required to have a document management system. Victor, does Department of Law have a DMS?
We have something that serves as it. I don't know if it's very sophisticated, but we've got something like that. Yeah. And I don't because, I don't do court issues often, so I don't know much about how that all sort of operates. So I'd have to get you somebody more knowledgeable than I about how that operates.
Mr. McBride, is that something that BSIT could do, work with whatever existing solution law has in place?
Yes, we could look at that. We did not review that.
I mean, I guess from my perspective here, and I don't think that I'm not perceiving this to be pushback from BSIT. I think this is just an honest assessment at a bird's eye view of what the council is looking to do here and what it would cost to implement that. But I would have to think there's a more cost affordable solution here. Either way, if we pass this legislation and it is signed by the mayor and enacted, there is an amendment that would require BSIT to assist law and DLR with the implementation of this, specifically the technical solution. Does BSIT have any issues with that amendment that would require they consult with you to get assistance on the technical solution?
Is that a question for Victor?
No, for BSIT. Yeah.
That I'm required to consult with Victor or Law on this. Is that what the question was?
No, I'm sorry. Let me read it again.
Hey, Mr. Chairman, this is Matt Stegman from the mayor's office, and I apologize that I wasn't on at the very beginning of this work session. But in my conversations with the leadership of BCIT, I do not believe that there is any opposition to the amendment. Again, the request from the committee at the last meeting on this bill was for BSIT to produce an estimate of what it would cost to implement this bill and what would be involved in that process, which they have done. And as you point out, there may be less costly ways to do it, but again, I think that the agency has produced a good faith estimate of what it would take to implement the law as written, and there may be other ways to do it, and that may be something we find out as we move forward. But I've heard no opposition to BSIT consulting with law and DLR to implement what's required in this bill.
Thank you, Matt. Yeah, I certainly believe that this is a good faith estimate, and I am very confident with just the excellent senior leadership that we have at BCIT under Todd Carter's leadership and the team that he's helped build and the way that organization has rebounded in the last year and a half, that when it comes time to work through this, that this is going to be viewed as a medial task for that agency. I'm very confident we can figure it out and get this done in a more cost affordable fashion and ultimately support the intent of the sponsors legislation here. So seeing that there's no opposition to that, if there's no questions from our colleagues, I will entertain a motion to move Amendment 1, which would include language that says with assistance from Baltimore City Information Technology. Is there a motion to move that amendment at this time?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Sneed, second by Clark. All those in favor of the amendment say aye.
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 All those opposed say nay. Let the record reflect, Matt, that there was 5 in favor. Excused members from the committee, Reisinger and Stokes, are absent. And with that, we have a bill that is amended. We have 5 1+ hour meetings on this in preparation for our first hearing. We had a very extensive hearing with input from the Department of Law. I want to thank especially Tony DeFranco from Department of Legislative Reference. Appreciate the mayor's office and the council president's office involvement in this and in each of those first 5 meetings. Mr. McBride, want to thank you and the team at BSIT. We're certainly looking forward to working on the implementation of this in the coming year. With that, I'll entertain a motion to move the bill favorably as amended.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Clark, second by Sneed. We'll do a roll call. Costello is a yes. Clark?
Yes.
Clark is a yes. Bullock?
Yes.
Pinkett?
Yes.
Reisinger is absent. Stokes is absent. Sneed?
Yes.
This bill passes 5-0 with 2 absences. This bill moves to second reader on Monday, September 21st at 5 p.m. If there's any other housekeeping, please let me know. Otherwise, we're going into recess. I will take that as no other housekeeping items. Committee is now in recess. Thank you all and have a wonderful weekend.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thanks. It's not Friday.